Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. After the devastating demise of its Disinformation Governance Board, the Biden administration appears to be pivoting to a new and novel way to suppress free speech. Biden has tapped Vice President Kamala Harris to head up a new task force ostensibly designed to combat online harassment. Should we be concerned? I have Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Graham Noble, with me to discuss. Welcome to the program, Graham.
Morning, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get into it. So, Vice President Kamala Harris is now tasked with forming a task force for online harassment, blah, 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 blah. Can you kind of give us the skinny on this whole thing?
Well, yes. Yeah, this is called the Task Force to Address Online Harassment and Abuse, as you said, and it's a new thing. And obviously, as you alluded to, it seems to be almost like a second attempt for the Biden administration to somehow govern or be seen to be governing online so-called hate speech. And of course, you know, they failed with the Department of Homeland Security's effort, which went down in flames mostly because the person they tapped to lead that effort was herself notoriously guilty of spreading disinformation online. But this is there's a slight difference here. That the Disinformation Governance Board was, as the name suggests, more about combating what they call disinformation. And of course, you know, what the definition of that is by no means clear. However, this one is actually more, as the name suggests, more about actual online abuse and online harassment. So it has a slightly different and possibly even more sinister purpose to it.
Good. And in a second, I want you to expound on that because I agree with you. But don't companies like Twitter and Facebook already have policies against harassment?
Yes, they do indeed. They are very, particularly Facebook and Twitter, those two that you mentioned, are very active in enforcing their so-called community standards, which is almost a laughable term. And of course, as we know, you know, as you and I and anyone who spends any time on social media platforms, particularly in discussions relating to politics and cultural issues, we know very well that these two particular social media platforms, as much as they claim not to do so, they heavily favor left-wing / progressive ideology and opinions, and they mostly go after right-wingers. And I'm sure you've seen multiple examples, as I have, of comments posted by people on the left that absolutely violate these companies' community standards, and yet they get a pass, whereas other people, you know, get thrown off or their accounts get somehow restricted or whatever. So yeah, these companies do. But of course, you know, but coming back to your question, why if these companies already have this kind of enforcement of standards, why is the administration doing this? Well, because, you know, Democrats believe, generally speaking, that these companies, Twitter, Facebook particularly, don't actually go far enough in censoring the right. And so therefore, they feel, you know, I mean, generally speaking, progressives feel that the government has a responsibility to do everything and to control everything. And so this is kind of a matter of also taking the policing of online speech, trying to more or less take it out of the hands of these private companies and put it in the hands of the government, which of course is kind of scary.
It's very scary. And some people who are skeptical would be like, oh, that just sounds like your usual right-wing conspiracy theories, yada, yada, yada. No, we saw the Biden administration actively doing this last year. I mean, they were putting pressure on Facebook to censor even more or opinions on the COVID-19 pandemic and vaccines that were not approved by the Democrats. Yeah. So this is a very real thing. Now, in your article on LibertyNation.com, you also pointed out that this is probably a targeted effort, like we said, to go after opinions of White House doesn't like. I mean, we know the words disinformation and misinformation and now harassment. You know, they say that definition is muddy, but it's not really. It's anything that Democrats don't like. They just won't say it. Now, can they actually do anything about this, or is this just more busy work for a very incompetent vice president?
Yeah, I think partly the whole thing is just kind of another distraction. And as I alluded to in my recent article, I think part of it perhaps is an attempt to somehow salvage Kamala Harris's reputation, because she has, I think it's fair to say, she has failed dismally at every task she's been given so far. Like, for instance, her role as border czar and getting to the root causes of illegal immigration, which of course she hasn't done at all. And in reality, we all know the root causes of illegal immigration, though that's a story for another day.
Yes.
But I think, so this is something that, because this new task force, it's going to be very difficult for them to really quantify, to really measure its success or its failure. And so therefore, if Kamala Harris is in charge of this, there's really no way for anybody to point the finger at her and say, oh, well, this is another failure, because you can't. How can you measure the results of this task force? I don't know.
But people are being nicer to each other. That's how you measure it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Now, in your article, you
it's not going to happen though.
No, especially not with you on social media. But I digress. So, you mentioned in your article that a lot of this is centered on members of the LGBTQ community. Do you think, is this just like an empty symbolic gesture that Democrats want to give to a marginalized community? Or do you think that they're really trying to do something with this? Or it's hard to say, because obviously there is that slippery slope, but at the same time, this could just be something that they're doing to make themselves look good. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it there, Jeff. I think it really is mostly an effort for them to be seen to be standing up for the LGBTQ community. It is worth noting that one of the part of the objective, the agenda, if you like, of this task force is actually been the protection of, and I quote, women and LGBTQI plus political leaders, public figures, activists, and journalists. And I find that rather disconcerting, because they're almost saying that these activists and journalists and public figures are getting some kind of like special protection against the First Amendment, essentially. And wow. I find that quite worrying, because it's almost as if they're saying, well, you will no longer be able to criticize or challenge certain politicians or certain public figures online without facing some kind of as yet completely unknown reprisal for that. And I find that disconcerting. And what I worry is that they're using mostly the LGBT community as a kind of a way to justify this task force, but they could easily expand it to, all kinds of other things.
Yeah, they could. I don't want to go to jail because I call Kamala Harris Black Hillary. Is that what's going to happen?
Quite likely. I'm sure that they would consider that harassment and abuse. Absolutely.
Probably. So this could very easily be a sneakier way to tamp down on free speech. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. But thanks for joining the program, Graham.
You're welcome, Jeff. Nice to see you.
And remember, the show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
Navy tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.